So welcome, viewers and listeners. This is another in a series of interviews and conversations that I have with people who are doing really good work in the world and have crossed some boundaries in their lives that are very meaningful and instructive for all of us. Um, so you can subscribe to this on YouTube or on your podcast, whatever podcast station you listen to, and that helps get the word out. So today, interviewing, talking with someone I met almost 20 years ago at the Fellowship of Reconciliation in Nyack, New York, where she was presenting about the amazing work that she's been doing. This is Fahima, and she is the director of the Afghan Women's Fund, Fahima Gaheez. I'm sure that even if you've only been paying a little bit of attention to what's going on in Afghanistan, you know that the conditions for women are very dire. And America's involvement in that war was over 2 decades and cost something like $1 trillion and the lives of over 2,500 Americans and probably up to 100,000 Afghans. Fahima Gaheez grew up in Afghanistan, and from a young age, she was involved in the early women's rights movement of that country. She's a chemist by training, and she chose to become involved with educational programs for women. And following her departure from Afghanistan, she remained a fervent and close supporter of the Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan, RAWA, as well as humanitarian aid to women and children of Afghanistan. She's arranged for the shipment of medical and other supplies to Afghanistan and has been actively involved in consciousness raising and fundraising for many years. She's addressed the United Nations, has traveled widely to speak at conferences and universities and religious organizations, and has appeared on many national and international television and radio stations. In February of 2002, she traveled to refugee camps in Pakistan and Afghanistan to work on women's rights and education. And while there, she co-founded the humanitarian organization for orphans and widows of Afghanistan in Kabul. She served as a consultant for 2 books dealing with Afghan women. One's Women for Afghan Women, Shattering Myths and Reclaiming the Future, which was edited by Sunita Mehta, and Behind the Burqa by Batya Swift Yugar, which is the memoir of 2 Afghan sisters. She's the recipient of numerous awards for her humanitarian work. So, Fahima, please start by telling us about you, what you know of your ancestors, your parents, your grandparents. What can we learn from understanding their lives in Afghanistan before it was on the radar of Americans, before the Taliban, before the US invasion and Russian invasions and all of that?
Well, thank you, Alan, for having me here. Just small corrections. The organizations that you mentioned, yes, I have supported them and I worked with them, but Haka and Rawa and even Hua do not exist anymore. However, some of the activists are scattered and they are still working on women's issues with different organizations, and they are, especially after the takeover of the Taliban, they are in other part of the world and they still work on those issues.
Oh,
So about me, I grew up in Afghanistan in a kind of a religious family. My grandparents, they both were working for the government, well educated. My father was a political leader, and he was also a publicist. And my family, although they were kind of religious, but they had in the in the big family, there were activists, there were leftists, there were rightists, there were socialists, communists, and nationalists, and all kinds of people. And of course, that formed my political views in my work and my desire for work on issues like women education.
Mm.
So like you mentioned, as a young girl, I was seeing um, the difference in the treatment of women and the rights of women and girls in the families, in the in the community, and it did bother me, and I started to do something about it, and that was. Although I did not know what to do, but it bothered me, and I started to work for women's rights. And actually, we started with literacy classes mm, uh, at the age of 10. We literacy classes for adults, and here and there we would be helping some women to be educated. At least they could read and write, that they could um, um, help themselves and help their families, and at least know their rights a little bit. So that's how we started, and then
This, Fahima, this was before there was anything like the Taliban. As,
the Taliban are a new phenomenon. The Afghanistan was always a religious country, but not fanatic. Afghanistan
mm,
was never a fanatic country. I'm sure there were elements of religious fanatics there, but um, um, there was a lot of tolerance, and people lived with each other. Whether, like I said, in my family, there were communists, there were socialists, there were nationalists, there were religious people, but they all lived with each other, and there were a lot of tolerance there.
mm.
So people accepted each other and had respect for each other. And then came a time that the relationship between Afghanistan and Soviet Union at that time was got very close, and the Western countries, NATO, US, and Arab sheikhs, they decided to um, uh, interrupt that relationship. So they decided to support the religious fanatics in Afghanistan, and most of those people are the outcasts of the society, that they with the US dollars they were trained, and with the US weapons, and the Arab Sheikh's weapons in Pakistan. So they formed different religious fanatic groups who fought inside of Afghanistan against the legitimate government and against the secular government of Afghanistan. And so um, the first generation of these religious fanatics, they were called mujahideen.
Mhm.
The US called them at that time our friends and our allies.
Mm.
And the Taliban are the second generation of the mujahideen. The Taliban are mostly the young boys who went to the religious madrasas that were funded by the US dollars, by the CIA, and by the Pentagon. So when they graduated from those religious madrasas, so they became, very powerful, and they came to power. So this is a long history from the 70s, that the interference of the NATO and Pentagon and CIA and Arab sheikhs made the Mujahideen and made the Taliban in Afghanistan.
So when you were a child, this was before what you're describing now, the women didn't have very equal rights and so forth, but you were able to work for literacy programs and establishing schools perhaps, or women's rights in a sense, where your safety wasn't a concern at that time. Is
It was
that fair to say, or?
No, my safety was not a concern at that time, because in 1964, in 1963, the Constitution of Afghanistan gave equal right to men and women. And in 1964, the first parliamentary election, four women got in the parliament. Actually, more women ran for parliament, but four women were able to enter the parliament. And from that day on, actually even before that, but from that day on, women were very involved in political arena, and they were involved in the building the country, and more schools were opened, and colleges and universities, and women would go abroad for further educations. And um, uh, well, I
So,
will say something that which some people may laugh, and that's not. They would call it kind of controversial, but women were wearing mini skirt on, and short sleeves, and so walking around in the big cities, not only in Kabul, actually in big cities.
yeah,
That means there were more tolerance, and there were women had the choice to wear either burqa, wear hijab, or wear miniskirt. So I was able to go to school and college, and my cousins and my aunt and my other relatives, they were able to go to school and college without any scarf, or without hijab, or without anything. I mean, that we had that choice at that time. Still, I felt like women did not have equal right, although the Constitution did give them equal right, but the society did not yet. Of course, it takes a long time for the society to get ready for it. Even those countries that they claim equal rights, even in this country, or some Western countries, women do not have equal rights.
sure.
They don't have equal pay. And,
Yeah.
there are a lot of issues. So Afghanistan
Well,
was just
especially
a
if you
new
go back
development.
to that time, like 50s and 60s,
Yeah.
the women's liberation, women's feminist movement was just beginning, really, right? It was just getting
Yeah.
rolling. Um,
But all in
so,
all, women were on the right path for
yeah.
getting and gaining more rights.
So, Fahima, was this during the time that at least the American media portrayed, I think, that time as a Soviet occupation? Is
No,
that
that was before the Soviet occupation,
this was
way
even
before.
before?
The Soviet occupation it happened in 1979, December 27,
Oh, oh, okay.
1979. I grew up in the 60s. I was
Uh-huh.
born in the 50s, grew up in the 60s. And my aunt, who is 15 years or so older than me, even she would be walking with mini skirt on,
I
or
see.
you know, it, it was. It was a different time. It was not the Soviet influence, neither was the Soviet occupation. But some political movement, of course, was. I mean, like I said, there were all kind of, when in 1963, when the Constitution of Afghanistan was ratified, that they have given right to political parties, and a lot of political parties formed. In one was socialist and communist, and leftist parties. And of course, those parties had relationship with the Soviet Union, because that's how the world was. So there was a capitalist system, and there is a communist system. The lefties had relationship with the Soviet Union, or with China. So but
So how did things change when there was an actual occupation by the
okay,
Russian forces at some
that's
point?
what I'm coming to. So when this happened, and the different leftist parties surfaced, and they were actually the leftist parties were the one who would support the labor union, the teacher union, and women's rights, and social justice. They were the one giving that slogans, and they were the one attracting young people, because mostly young people are attracted to social justice and rights, and stuff like this, and anti-war and anti-violence, and so attracted those people, and that uh, alarmed the government at that time of Afghanistan, the monarchy alarmed. And from the groups of these people, and it was really very fast. The movement for liberation, it was very fast. And I mean, the Constitution came out in 63, the parties were formed in 64, and by 76 and 77, there were already uprising against the government because of the low wages, because of the unemployment, because of a lot of issues that the Afghan society had, and not much development. So in 1978, the leftist party, the People Democratic Party, came to power. But way before that, way before 1978, the government of Afghanistan leaned toward the Soviet Union. They leaned toward Soviet Union. Once that happened, although the U.S. was busy with Iran at that time, Afghan government wanted to have good relationship and close relationship with the U.S. to help with development of the country. But the U.S. was busy there. But when the Afghan government leaned toward the Soviet Union for support, the U.S. and the Western allies got upset. And then that is when they formed these religious fanatics groups in Pakistan to fight the Afghan government. That is way before the Soviet Union, way before the PDPA, the People Democratic Party, took over. So because of all the intervention and the issues that was, the people were not happy with the government, although the government was kind of leftist. But, they and they put some of the leaders of the leftist party in jail. So some call it revolution, some call it coup d'etat happened, and the PDPA and the so-called Communist Party took over. But the unrest was there before, even at the time when Ford was the president, and then after when Carter was the president. They supported the wrong people, the thieves and the thugs of the society, and used religion against the government of Afghanistan at that time.
Yeah,
So
that was a sad legacy. One of the sad legacies of Carter, even though he's done so much good in the world, he
yeah,
played
but
a negative role in
Carter did
Afghanistan.
two bad things. One was the Iran issue, and one was Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So anyway, the communist, the PTPA party came to power in 1978. But of course, the attack from Pakistan side and from Iran side was increased a lot. So at that time, the Afghan government asked the Soviet Union to help them with the to fight the attacks from Pakistan from other side. So the Soviet Union did help, but it says that they had an agreement in 1919. Afghanistan government at that time, when just got their freedom from the British, there was an agreement between Afghanistan government at that time and that time Soviet Union was new, was just 2 years old. So that if Afghanistan territory is in danger, then the Soviet Union will help Afghanistan. So based on that agreement, so the Soviet invaded Afghanistan. Well, actually, they said they helped Afghanistan, but whatever you name it, it was military intervention. So the Soviet came in 1979, December of 79 in Afghanistan. But the intervention of the US and NATO, Pentagon, CIA, the Western countries, Arab sheikhs, started from 1974. So now think about it. It's 5 years. It took 5 years for the Soviet to invade, and then why the U.S. and others were interfering in Afghans' affair? So it's supporting in giving military and monetary support to the Mujahideen, who were really the outcasts of the society, the thieves and the thugs of the society, that they found them and chose them, and then um, taught them how to use religion against the government of
Yeah.
Afghanistan at that time.
Is there perhaps a book or a couple of books that you could recommend? We could put it in. I'll put it in the listing when we post the YouTube that Americans could that you would recommend that Americans could read or people could read that would give like what you think is a fair account of what happened during this whole history that you're, of course, doing in a very capsule short way.
There
Um,
are several articles in the books written by two American journalists that you may know them, Alan. They are from Massachusetts, Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gold. They have written about the Afghanistan history and about these issues. And there are also books written by Americans, and there are several books written. Right now, I cannot think of the name, but one
like I
is
say, we'll post it when we'll
okay.
get the links and information and
I'll
post it
send you
with
that
this.
in the email,
Yeah.
and then you can post it. Yeah.
Coming back to your own journey, what caused you to leave, and when was that, and what was that like for you to leave, your country that you grew up in?
Well, I left Afghanistan because I am a very rigid person. I
Rigid?
a rigid person. I have once I have a principle in my life to set up, I go by that. And maybe that was not the right thing to do, but that put me in trouble many, many, many times in my life. Um, as a child, I learned how to fight for a cause and what to do for a cause, and if you just go derail a little bit, then you will betraying your cause. You're betraying people. So that's what I have been doing. And then when I saw some issues were not right by me, I was in trouble with the authority, and I was in trouble with the government, that leftist government at that time. Some of the stuff I questioned, and because of my work with women's rights, I knew some of the high position people, and then I was in trouble, and I had no choice but leaving. But me leaving Afghanistan was a temporary thing. That's what I was told, that um, you need to leave for a few years and then come back when things are different than
What year was that?
1979. I,
Oh,
I left Afghanistan just 2 months before the Soviet invaded Afghanistan.
wow.
So I went to Europe, and for a few years I worked there in cancer research, and then from there I came to the U.S. and then went back to Europe, and then came back to the U.S. But all this time, I was working with Afghans abroad, and I was working with Afghans in Afghanistan. At that time, working in Afghanistan was not that easy because there was no internet and there was no technology that we have today. The connection
Mm.
we had was not, so strong. But I was working some, doing fundraising and sending some, funds for this project and that project, and so in not as much as I do now, because I had also small children, and taking care of the children and putting food on the table in a foreign land that you don't know, you don't understand the language or the system, or everything
Mhm.
else, and have children. Yeah. But then later, when I was settled a little more and the kids grew up, a little, and then they didn't need my help very much. I decided to dedicate my life to this cause, and then I started to go to Afghanistan and build schools and help women with education. But when I did that, the situation in Afghanistan was way worse than when I left Afghanistan. So women lost a lot of rights, and they have to cover themselves. And the Taliban and the Mujahideen destroyed the country, destroyed the system, and changed the society so much because when you're pounded all the time with the wrong mission and wrong idea as a child, that's what you get. And the children grew up, and by the time I went back to Afghanistan, the children who were, I mean, when I left, they were like a year old or even not born, or so they were adult. They were the one that building the community, the society. They completely, went backward, and their thought and their ideologies were very different than ours when we were growing up. But still, it was not their fault. It was the fault of those who tried to destroy the fabric of the society. So we tried to work there and build schools and build literacy classes and women vocational training for women empowerment, and digging wells for clean water and water for irrigations. And
You were doing this from a distance. I mean, you were supporting people who were doing that on the ground, or did you go back and were you able
no,
to
I was
actually?
going back. When we had an organization as a board member, I was going back several times a year.
Hmm.
But also when I was here, I was overseeing some of the project and managing it. And, we had a lot of.
Was this during the U.S. Invasion or?
I started before the US invasion going to Pakistan. From
Okay.
1997 on, I was going to Pakistan and helping Afghan refugees there and people who were going back and forth. So, but then once the US, after the US invasion, I was able to go inside of Afghanistan. Yes.
Let's see.
Yeah.
What was it? What was life like? Can you give a description? I mean, Americans just pretty much know about the war. You know that American soldiers were there and they were, some of them were getting hurt, and of course, many of them were wounded and have post-traumatic stress disorder and so forth. But what was it like for the Afghan people while the U.S. was there with its
Um,
military force?
Sometimes when I talk about it, I hear, people say, "Oh, you don't like Americans." No, I do love Americans. I do not like the American system that they go to other countries and intervene and invade and destroy things. So Americans went there under the precinct of war on terror. Okay, they went to get rid of the same people that they created.
Mhm.
So the Taliban were the second generation of the Mujahideen that they created. Al Qaeda people were trained here in Virginia, in North Carolina. The Al Qaeda was formed and support, I mean, formed maybe not, but supported by the American dollars. So um, the Afghans has nothing to do with the 9/11. They had nothing to do with 9/11. So they went and invaded Afghanistan and went and bombed villages and killed innocent people in search of the terrorists. So who were the terrorists? They called the Taliban terrorists. They called Al Qaeda terrorists. Okay, they were terrorists. The terrorists that you created. But in the same time, when they were bombing the villages, those poor villages whose income was less than $1 a day for those people, for the whole family, they were bombed by thousands and thousands of dollars bombs. Americans were having lunch and dinner with the Taliban leaders in Islamabad, in Doha, paying for their big offices in Doha, paying for their trips in Doha. So you're you're fighting the terrorists, but you are having dinner and wining and dining with the leaders of the terrorists there in Doha and Islamabad and other areas. What is this? What is behind this?
But could you just slow that one down a little bit? That would be a shock for most Americans to hear. You said, was it the government or the military or American business people who were
No,
having these
American
connections with the
military,
Taliban?
American government and military. The American government and military had relationship and and talks with the Taliban leaders,
Uh-huh.
paying for their trips, paying for their office in Doha. You can check the Doha, Qatar, paying for their office, paying their salaries, and paying for their dinner and wine and dining with them. At the same time, American uh, jets bombing villages in Afghanistan in search of terrorists. So the poor person who is uh, working in a construction, for example, making $1 or $2 a day, is he a terrorist or the Al Qaeda leader or the Taliban leader who have an office in Doha? Who is the terrorist? So with the leader of the terrorists, they are dining and whining. But with the poor people who have no idea so about terrorism, about any, I mean, they're just poor people who most of them have no education. They have no knowledge about the world and they have no clue about how the world function and work. So they are being bombed. My experience is, although I went to several military bases because I needed some help for the schools, I never got them, never ever got them any support from them, except that one time we went to one of the military bases, a couple friends who were working in the military base. In the middle of the night, they took some stuff out of there and gave them to me to take them to a clinic in a few villages. I do not know. And they say that there are stuff there that they're expiring in the American military bases. They are not using them, but they are not giving them to people. And then we said, okay, how can we take them out? How can you? They said, okay, come sometimes, and they did give me those things. Those are a couple American friends who did give me that, but American military never helped me with schools or weld or anything. Anyway, uh, when I was driving around in Kabul, I mean, of course, I'm driving in Kabul. I couldn't drive in Kabul because that's such a, first of all, I did not know the Kabul was completely a different map. But the driver, sometimes we would be behind a military car or a tank.
Jeep or
So
something.
American military, and they told us to stay away. We were not able to pass them. We were not able to be even close to them. So that is my experience as an American, as an Afghan American who lived most of my life in the United States, then Afghanistan. So that was, and they would be just pointing the guns to us to stay away from here. And I heard stories that when a car tried to pass them by because they were in a hurry or whatever it was, they shoot them. So that was the life there in Afghanistan. I mean, it was occupied by American military. And there are a lot of other stories that Americans friend told me about the atrocities of American militaries. And the one thing that
What was it that you mentioned it a little bit. You said something about wells and schools and medical supplies. What was you and your allies and organization doing while this bombing and war was going on?
Well, it was not like the bombing were everywhere that we were going. There are certain areas that they were bombing. Um, and sometimes they would bomb a hospital, and they would bomb a wedding, and they would bomb a funeral without any reason. So what we were doing, we were building schools, we were forming schools, we were renting tents to have school under tents, and we were renting people's homes, basements to have to form schools there. Or sometimes we would open schools in the open, just under a tree, just for people to,
Was your work attacked at all by the Taliban,
um,
by the forces that
no,
other
no.
than the problems you were having with the Americans, was there also that?
No. So the thing is, it's not like all Taliban are against education. I mean, right now, some Taliban leaders are trying to convince the supreme guy who is invisible. We don't know who that person is. Convince them to open schools for the girls, and girls' education is a must. Even at that time, what we were doing when villagers came to us and still ask us to open schools or help women with education and this and that, we would tell them that you need to get all the permit from, I mean, as a community, you need to get all the permit, the legal issues is on you, and we will open the school and we will fund them and we will provide supplies and teacher salary and stuff. So that's what we did. And of course, the Taliban were somebody's cousin, somebody's relative. It's not like, they were in agreement with the villages with the villagers to open schools. Um, our schools were not attacked, although I was at twice in danger, and once was a abducting plan, which fortunately I got very sick that day and I couldn't go where I went to. So they abducted our teachers. So another time there was a bomb, but we don't know if the bomb was set for us or for somebody else. I don't know. So actually, one time Kathleen and I went to a village, and then we were trapped in a valley.
This is
So
Kathleen Foster.
Kathleen Foster and I were, yeah. We were trapped there, and we have to find a way, but the villagers helped us to get out of there. So track them, trick the attackers, and we got out of there safely. But
Just to make a note, Kathleen Foster is a documentarian filmmaker who has been supportive of your work and made a film about some of it. Is that correct?
yes,
That we could also link to or post the information about.
yes, okay.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, not many times our projects were attacked because the villagers wanted those projects
Mhm.
and they protected them. The villagers did
You
protect
know,
them.
I think, and maybe even myself, who likes to think of myself as a little more enlightened, many Americans just see it all very black and white. Taliban, all of them are terrorists or want to hurt women and prevent women from having education, prevent education from happening at all. And it's not quite like that. I get the picture. There's lots of shades of gray, and
Yeah.
uh, even
Um,
within the Taliban itself, whatever we call the Taliban.
we built a school and we started in 2020. And the area called Achin, where the mothers of all bombs were dropped by Mr. Trump. I don't know if you remember, 2017, he dropped the mothers of all bombs. There were several thousands of ton bomb there. Um, in that area, after 4 years or so, 3 years, we started a school. We started a school in somebody's home, and then we started the building. And the building was finished and was supposed to be open. I was supposed to be going there and inaugurating the school when the Taliban took over. Of course, I couldn't go. I couldn't go there, but the Taliban leader from the local Taliban leader, he opened the school, and I have a videotape of it. He thanked me, he thanked Afghan Women's Fund for that. He even told us that he will try to, that was an elementary school. He said that he will try um, to uh, to help us with an high school, that school would be developed to a high school. So although that it is not a high school, but he promised that. At least that means he wanted the school to be a high school. He wanted women's education. Another thing that he said that he will propose that the school would be used also as a community college for the girls, which that did not happen. But at least he had the idea and the intention to do so. Um, and from that day on, I mean, sometimes I do get calls from some people who are working with the Taliban. They want to, have education for girls. But of course, their hands are tied. They said, wherever is the order coming, we can't do much against the order. But I mean, we opened the school last April. Yeah, this last April in Lahman. We opened the school, and this morning I got a few pictures of the girls are learning computer now. So in that area, the Taliban are in power. I mean, the local Taliban allowed us to open a school there, and girls are coming and learning computer. So it is the decision is done by the higher supreme Taliban, whoever that is, that we don't even know. Nobody has seen the guy, but but yes, it is challenging, and we are working hard. We are trying to work around the obstacles to give people some education. One of the things that we are doing now is that with a team of people, we have this flash drive that we put all the curriculum of the school, the PDF copy, in a makeshift classroom. The teacher teaches and we videotape them. Put everything in a flash drive and then send that around. We have sent thousands and thousands of them around to in rural areas of Afghanistan, that people can either download them in their computer or in their cell phone or iPad or whatever device they have. They download them and then they read. Of course, it's not a school. It's not the best situation, but at least the next possible and best situation for the girls to be educated
They're
until,
getting an education, yeah.
yeah, until
Yeah,
they
I was reading about some of that in your really excellent newsletter, which we'll also post. The Afghan Women's Fund newsletter lists province after province where different projects are going on. Schools, wells are being built, literacy programs, and these flash drive educational devices are being distributed. It's just wonderful work that you're continuing to do even under this situation that's going on right now. So I get the picture that there is a kind of supreme leader or group of Taliban that are very hardline, that are very fundamentalist, and yet at local levels, there are individuals who are leaders who officially they're part of the Taliban infrastructure or organization, and yet they have more liberal views, more open to being supportive of some of the projects that you're doing, tolerating them, maybe even helping you out a little bit. And on the ground, from what I understand, because the overarching Taliban rule is that women are not even allowed to go out by themselves. Uh, is that in the streets or and
not
so
in
you
the
have mostly
city.
men who
In
are
the
helping you?
cities, women, especially in Kabul, which is like about 7 million, the population like 7 million something. In Kabul, women can go. yes, and they don't have to wear burqa. They can wear like a scarf and cover themselves, and that's
Kabul.
all. Yeah, in some cities also. But in rural areas, women are wearing burqa for their own protections, and even before, women usually in the rural areas they would not go out very much, except for in their own village and their own area, not very much without a male relatives. I mean, that was a kind of a common thing there. Women did not travel, hundreds of miles without a male relatives in the rural areas. In the
So
villages,
even
in
this was
their
just
own.
even the part of the culture, you're saying, Afghan
It,
culture for
it
in
became
the rural areas.
it became kind of part of the culture after the Mujahideen took over and the
Oh,
Taliban took over.
okay.
That became part of the culture. It was when I was growing up, that was not, not. I mean, there were people, yes, they would not go without a male relatives, but it was not a common
Mm.
thing, and it was acceptable. People would go without or with, but now became kind of part of the culture because the restriction of Mujahideen, the first generation of the Jihad, and then the Taliban, the second generation, their restriction kind of, forced women to either be home or not travel alone. So they
Mm.
do it for their own security too. So,
So
but
a lot of your work is being done actually by men,
now
supporters.
by men.
Uh-huh.
Then before the Taliban took over, most of the volunteers were women. They would go from, because most of our work are in the rural areas.
Mm.
So before that, women would go from village to village and even travel from city to the villages and do the work.
What's
But
the
now with men.
distribution of people? How many of Afghans are rural versus city?
Um, the
Approximately, you know?
Well, I mean, I don't have any data, but the difference between the cities in the rural areas is big. The gap is big in Afghanistan. It's not like here. So, like in the rural areas, in villages, everybody knows everybody.
Mm.
Really, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
It's They know their name, they know their ages, they know their relatives, they know where they live, and so you go to a village and ask them, where is, let's say, Joseph's home? Oh, who
Mhm.
is Joseph? Joseph, Abraham's brother. So, and that's, they tell you where they are, and then they take you there, and so that is the rural areas, the villages life. So,
Yeah.
and because of that, you have to obey the village life and their culture and their restriction. You have to obey. That's why women there are not, for their own protection. They are not just doing whatever they want to do. They
Mhm.
have to abide by the
Mhm.
village and rural laws. So
So
I
are these men and or any women still that are volunteers for what your work, are
Yeah.
they in danger?
Yeah, like right now we have there is an area that the main guy who is doing the shopping and everything else is a man, and the teachers are women. I contact the guy. He sent me pictures. Like this morning, he sent me pictures. He sent me pictures. He would do the shopping and he would report back, and so everything else. And women do the work.
Mhm.
So right now in that area we have four classes. Yeah, we have four classes, and teachers are women and men are doing just the work.
So education is probably the primary focus, but there's also the getting clean water, digging, having wells dug. There's also uh, building clinics
Yeah,
and getting medical supplies to people.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, The need is, of course, great enough. Afghanistan went through 50 years of war, and in 50 years of war, much is destroyed and not much is built. So in the 20 years of the U.S. Involvement in Afghanistan, not much was built by the U.S. But, people did invest in Afghanistan. People who were abroad, they went back and they invested. And so that happened. But still, I mean, the population is growing and cities are getting bigger, and the need is much bigger. In some areas, there is no clinic. And, like we built a clinic in 2006 in an area. There was only 2 rooms for the clinic, and we built a whole 3 rooms with the bathroom and a hallway. And so that at that time, that was a big clinic because before the vaccination and the birth and everything was taking place in one room in one hallway. So when we built that, we completed, separated the vaccination area from the other part of the clinic. So which that helped a lot. I mean, and it didn't cost us very much. And from that day on, the mortality rate among newborn was like, I don't know, what's like 5 or so uh, for every 100, like 5%. But then once we built a clinic, no mortality at all. They reported. So, and stuff like this, which, I mean, not big projects, small projects that help people, schools, which helps, 200 here, 2,000 here, 1,000 people here to have schools and have protection and have security walls and buildings. And the very people who were under the tree in the heat or in the rain and the snow, now they have a building and they have computer. So that is a small step, but it's a positive step. So
I'm just going to adjust my lighting curtain here to change the lighting. Good. Yeah. Well, it's just amazing work that you're doing, Fahima, and I'm just so admire your perseverance and your courage, and of course the people, anonymous people who are over there. There must be dozens, hundreds. I don't how many allies on the ground are there within Afghanistan.
there are hundreds, but this is not just my work, Alan.
Mhm.
I am doing some of the legwork, and I'm kind of the liaison. But there are
Mhm.
other people who trust in me in our work, and they trust the Afghan Women's Fund, and they're supporting. Without their support, we would not be able to do anything. We have donors that every month they are giving like $10. That's all they can afford. And I'm grateful to the person who's giving $10 or to the person who's giving $5,000 or $10,000. Equally, I am grateful to the support and the trust that people have put in me, and their solidarity with the work, and their uh, their ongoing help and assistance, and that change the lives of so many people there, so many people there, that
It's really, it's
I'm
really
grateful
great.
to that. And like I said, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I am just, maybe I'm on the surface. There are other people there who are doing
Yeah.
volunteer work. There are people here who are supporting all the time.
Yeah. We nobody can fix anything by themselves, right? It takes a lot of people. It takes a village, or it takes many people to make
Yeah.
change. Um, I know you were not particularly happy, and you were critical of the U.S. involvement militarily, getting involved in Afghanistan, but you also, I think, were pretty critical of the way, once it was there, they withdrew. Uh, and can you say anything about the consequences of the that you yourself have experienced in your own work? regarding what happened since the United States pulled out of Afghanistan, and what you think about the U.S. role should be going forward?
Um,
I know
well,
that's a
let's
lot.
just go back to the withdrawal. In the 20 years of US occupation in Afghanistan, they supported, although they went for women's rights, they went for human rights, and so on and on. That was their slogans, but they supported the same violator of human rights and women's rights that for years destroyed Afghanistan, the same mujahideen, the warlords, the drug dealers, the warmongers. The US supported them. Although Mr. Karzai came to power first, but he was surrounded by the warlords. And then Mr. Ghani came to power, but he was surrounded by the warlords. And that was because the US gave them, the warlords, so much power, so much position. Meetings, the military generals would be meeting with those warlords without the Afghan government knowledge. So they would be invited to the embassy. That is just so not in the diplomatic norms of any country. So
I don't
they
know if you know, I don't know if you saw it, but there was just an article in the New York Times, finally, basically describing what you're saying right now about how the U.S. really just
they
supported the
they
warlords that were
undermined the US
right.
undermined they actually sidelined the Afghan government, and they did whatever they wanted to do with the mullah, with the leader of a religious mosque, for example. I mean, there are hundreds of pictures and hundreds of reports about them, and warmongers, warlords, and others. They would just be meeting without knowledge of Afghan government. But they also their relationship with the Taliban started in 2006, and they would be meeting with the Taliban without the knowledge of Afghan government. And then they signed an agreement with the Taliban without Afghan government. There are two but there are 2 points in the agreement, which is the Afghan government does not know, even American people do not know. The whole Congress does not know either. It's just hidden, and that is hidden from the public here, from the public in Afghanistan, hidden from the Afghan government, and was signed by Mr. Khalilzad and some of the, at that time, the Biden administration, Trump administration first, and then Biden, and then just some Taliban leaders. What they are, nobody knows yet. But the way they left Afghanistan, the way they withdrew from Afghanistan, the Afghan government did not know. 3 o'clock in the morning, they packed their necessary stuff, whatever they were, left 3 o'clock in the morning. They left Bagram base and left thousands and thousands and thousands of weapons and equipment behind, and the Taliban were right by the door. It's like they were invited to come stay by the door, and we are leaving, and you just come and take over. And that's what happened. And not only that, so the Taliban came to power in August 15th. The special forces, some of the Afghan military were in Afghanistan. They were brought to the US. They were evacuated as of April, May, June of that year. So if you're evacuating the military, so how can the Afghan government fight the Taliban? So they evacuated the military, the special force. I mean, I have interviewed them. I have helped actually those families here in Baltimore area. Asked them, when did you come? April. What is that all about? You came in April and the Taliban came to power in August. There are many, many people who were evacuated in the military way before the Taliban took over. So that was the plan. And now and then they blame Mr. Ghani for that. But the Afghan government Mr. Ghani and Mr. Saleh, they did not even know about what is going on, what are they doing, and what is the plan. So the US really betrayed the Afghan people, the Afghan women, and the Afghan government. I mean, the slogan of women's rights and democracy and human rights and all these things were empty slogans that how can you give the country without the will of the people to a bunch of terrorists and a violator of human rights and people who have no clue about women's rights or they are against women's rights to those people? Then where are your conviction? Where are your idea of human rights and women's rights that you always call yourself a champion of? So that's what happened, and boom, Afghanistan fell. The government, some of them left, some of them, yeah, some left before. The president left in the last minutes because he did not want any bloodshed. And the people who were working, some of the people who were working with the embassies, with the different organizations and some militaries and this and that, you saw the images, how some of them came and then the rest are left behind, and some of them are killed, some of them are in hiding. People are in hiding. Our people are in hiding. Our volunteers are in hiding since 2021. 7 of our volunteers got killed. 7 of them, young people and women, got killed. So
was the alternative for the U.S. to continue to?
No. It was, everything that you do, it should be responsible. Okay, 20 years of occupation was not responsible occupation, but at least the withdrawal should have been responsible. They should have not evacuated the military, Afghan military from there, the special forces, those people before that. They should have not crippled, the government before they left there. They actually they presented that 40 million people, 40 million Afghan with the government to the Taliban. That was irresponsible. This was inhuman, really inhumane thing that they have done in Afghanistan. Brutal. I'm really, you can feel the anger in me. 3.5 years later, I'm still angry about that. It just feels like they go destroy nation after nation after nation, and then they go to another project. That's what they do. Okay, what's next? How can we make money? And we, American people, paying for the weapons. We are paying for the wars. They just go from one war to another war to another war. And the contractors are making money. Pentagon is making money. The weapon companies are making money. In the process, the nations are destroyed there and here and there and there. And we don't do anything about it. And we just, all what we do, we pay, for the wars.
Wow. I appreciate your outrage for sure, and frustration too. With, I mean, it doesn't appear that the United States is committed to doing any reparations or rebuilding or helping. Do you get any support for your work from any level of government?
No.
U.S.
No. Many years ago, I went to the USAID, had meeting with them. They said, since our organization is volunteer organization, we are not helping any volunteer organization, and we are volunteers. Yeah, we are 100% volunteer organization, working, all of us working here voluntarily. And of course, we do pay our teachers there and for our schools. And, of course, we pay for that. But here, we are all volunteers. No. Never, ever. Except that the one time that somebody from the military base on his own helped us. That was it.
Well, Again, I want to tell you how much I admire and want to be supportive of your work. And let me ask you on a personal level, Fahima, how you keep going? When it looks like the situation is like it is, it has so much hopeless. Many people would feel hopeless. Many people in this country, progressive-minded people, are feeling hopeless right now. Um, what keeps you going? What is it that where do you find your strength? Where do you find the motivation, the ability to keep going?
Um, Alan, what can we do if we don't keep going? We can't just sit and watch and cry and not do anything. We still have to do something about it, whatever we can. I mean, I'm sure I don't have the energy um, that I used to have 20 years ago, but whatever energy is left, I want to use it. What is this life all about? I mean, you're helping each other. You're living with each other. You're helping each other. That's all it's for me. That's what it's all about. You know, especially at this age. I'm not looking for position and money, and I mean, never did before. But at this age, when I see children are dying and children have no education, when I see the future of people that I knew or I know are in danger, so of course I want to do something about it. And you do too. And where do you get your energy?
Mhm.
But you do.
Mhm.
So although the US situation is much better than Afghan situation, the
Mhm.
Afghan society is way worse. You do work here, you help people, for the betterment. And I do whatever I can to just at least put food on the table for people or have some education at least.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for your work and
Thank you.
blessings to you.
Thank
And
you.
I will post information about your work and ways that people could donate and support and help.
Okay.
And
And
God willing, we
I
will.
will send you that information about the books too,
Oh, absolutely.
that you can link
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Thank you, Alan.
Okay. Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. Thank you.